Hello and welcome to Good Enough Chats, the podcast on a mission to destigmatise men's mental health one chat at a time. My name's Dan Boucher and I'm the host and producer of the podcast. And before we jump into this episode, I just want to give you a quick heads up about what it's going to be covering today. So in this chat, I'm joined by Harry Richards, who is a filmmaker who has just made what is now an award-winning short film dealing with the subject of student suicide. It is an incredibly powerful film, and we talk about it quite a bit in the conversation, and I urge you to watch it because there are lots of lessons to be learned from there, as well as it being a really powerful piece of drama. Harry, in this conversation, though, is talking about his own mental health journey, and a lot of the discussion focuses on the experiences he felt being in the closet as a gay man and struggling with the idea of him coming out and the impact that it might have on his family. He's incredibly eloquent. He's really open. He deals with all of my bumbling, daft questions along the way too. And I think this is a really enlightening chat that is going to help a lot of people to understand A, what it's like, and B, how you can come through the other side of it and absolutely flourish. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump into it. Hi, Harry. How are you doing?
Hello, Dan. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. The sun is out. I can just behind you, as I'm looking at it, I can see my dog lounging around on the grass, making the most of the sunshine, and all is well in his worlds.
Oh, good.
Harry, for the benefit of our listeners, our viewers of the podcast, could you introduce yourself? What's your name? Where'd you come from? Shoe size, profession, and the best flavour of crisp, in your opinion, obviously.
Okay, let's see if I can remember all of that. So, I'm Harry Richards. I am a filmmaker. I've recently made a film called Contact Hours. Um, my shoe size is a size 10,
Mhm.
and my favorite flavor of crisps probably has to be paprika, the
Oh,
crinkly ones. Yeah.
that's a continental flavour. That is when you go.
Yeah, well, I've just been in Spain, so maybe that's why.
That'll be it. You go down the crisp aisles and it's either ready salted paprika or peanut flavour for some reason.
Peanut. Oh God.
Yeah. Oh, have you not tried? Oh,
I haven't yet.
it's like What's-Its, but covered in peanut dust.
God,
So,
okay.
you know,
I need to try that.
assuming you don't have anaphylactic shock experiences when you have peanuts,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just try them out.
Did I miss one of the questions?
Where are you from?
Oh, where am I from? I'm
Yeah.
from Southwest London, but I now live in North London.
Okay.
I've
So,
made a big move
uh,
across the river. Yeah.
excellent stuff. Right. Let's jump straight into this then. So, why is it that you're here today sharing your lived experiences of mental health with us?
Um, why am I here today? I think I'm here today because mental health is something that I've always felt very passionate about. And by that I mean speaking more openly about mental health challenges that I've had with the goal of hopefully trying to create space for other people to feel like they can also share openly about their own experiences.
Hmm.
And I guess that's kind of manifested most strongly in this recent short film that I made about student suicide. Um, but, I'm not here today to promote that. I'm just here to talk about my own challenges with mental health and hopefully open the door for other people to feel like they can speak more openly about theirs.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for coming forward to have this conversation. You're exactly right. That's what this platform is all about: is showing men that it's not just okay, but it's good to talk about this stuff and to help people feel less isolated and like there are more positive things that they might be able to do to support themselves and help improve their situation.
Mhm.
You're right. This isn't a promo piece for the film, but it's absolutely relevant for us to kind of talk about it up front before we kind of jump
Yeah,
into
of course.
the conversation. So I was introduced to the film by a mutual friend of ours, Chris Campton, who's been a previous guest on the show. And why don't you? Well, I'll say it's an award-winning film now. We can say that, right?
It is an award-winning film. We can say that indeed, yes.
It got some gongs, which is excellent work. And I saw it myself. Well, it's probably about 6 weeks ago, I think.
Okay, yeah.
I watched it. You kindly shared a link with me, and I was incredibly moved by the impact of it. Could you, for the benefit of the audience, could you kind of give them a bit of context about what the film covers?
Yeah, of course. So the film tells a story of student suicide through the eyes of a university caretaker who is struggling to connect with his son. And the film was written by a good friend of mine called Rufus Love, and I directed and produced the film. And the reason we wanted to make it is that sadly, when we were both at university at Edinburgh, uh, we had a number of people within our cohort who died by suicide, and we, as a result, felt it was very important to try and shed more light on this issue. And being creatives and filmmakers, we felt the best kind of way that we could do that was through film. So Rufus, a couple of years ago, sent me the screenplay um, for the short, and I was very moved by it. And I think I could really feel that there was big potential in this story to open up wider conversations around suicide. And so we launched the film in October last year. And since then, we've been taking it out to universities and film festivals. And around the UK, we've been holding lots of discussions around suicide and the film's themes of mental health. And it's been a real blessing to see the way that university communities, in particular, have really kind of taken the film and used it as an opportunity to encourage students and staff and parents to speak more openly about their own mental health and also share, um, for us to share the work of some incredible charities who are doing great work to prevent suicide. And actually, one of the biggest reasons we made the film is to signpost towards the helplines that are available to people that are, struggling with suicidal thoughts and or might be at the point of taking their own life.
Yeah. And it is an incredibly powerful film, as everything that Harry's just articulated would suggest. It's if you have um, children at university, about to go to university, it's worth watching. If you are a student who is at university or is about to go to university, it's worth watching. And anybody who has been affected by the subjects of suicide, of losing someone, especially someone so young,
Mm.
is absolutely brilliantly done. And I will make sure that we drop a link to
Yes,
the
please do.
website the description, so people can find it and they can hopefully potentially see some of the screenings of it as well as you're
Yeah,
taking.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're continuing to tour it for the rest of the year.
Brilliant, fantastic, and that must be that's hard work, though, right? Touring that, and I mean, it's intense
Yeah.
conversations, intense discussions, but also a lot of travel, a lot of
Yeah, it
organising.
is. I mean, it's a big undertaking for sure, but I think what's been amazing is that Rufus and I, we're the ones that travel to each place. However, in each place, we're welcomed by these incredible well-being teams and local charities and local suicide prevention organizations. And so really like a lot of the work is it's collaborative between us and the people that are actually hosting the events. So, wherever we go, we just feel really fortunate that there are people that are there working really hard to put on an event to show this film and to create a space for safe discussion around the film's themes.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you. So we've kind of touched on the broader context of why you're here today, but let's kind of bring it right into the present day. You just mentioned that you've just come back from munching a ton of paprika flavored crisps in Spain.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But how has your last week been?
It's been pretty good, actually. I've been quite lucky that I've been at a music festival in Barcelona.
Oh,
So
no.
a festival called Primavera, and so I was out there with about 13 friends. So it's quite a big group of us, all letting off some steam and listening to some great music artists. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good actually. And now it's sunny in London. It feels like I've come back at the right time. So no, I'm feeling very, very grateful.
Yeah. But to be fair, I think you have come back at the right time because earlier on in the week it was grim.
Yeah, yeah. So I heard.
Fantastic. Okay. So let's set some context then around your journey. Can you walk us through where your own experiences with poor mental health started and kind of how that journey has continued through to the present day?
Yeah, of course. So I'd say that a lot of my experiences with my challenges with mental health have come from the fact that I was in the closet as presenting as a straight man, but in the closet as a gay man for many years. And as a result of that, I suffered from quite a lot of dark thoughts and a lot of kind of deep sadness for a long time, as I felt that I didn't really have a place in this world. I felt like I was very going to be exiled from my friends and family at the time that I eventually came out. So I came out at the age of 22 and I'm now 27. So I came out about 5 years ago. And up to that point, I really felt that, as much as I had a very loving family and some really loving friends, I felt that I wasn't able to be openly gay in the world I had grown up in. I think that the school I went to and the university I went to, just the environment was very tailored towards the traditional straight model of a man and a woman,
Mm.
and it was very binary in that respect. And so I think I struggled for a long time to understand kind of where I fit into that. Um, and over the years, I had girlfriends and I was doing things that I thought a straight man should do because I felt this real need to kind of present as straight in order to fit in and to survive. But repeatedly, and for the most part, I was pretty happy. But then this sort of sadness would creep up on me, and there would be moments where I live my life at quite a fast pace, and then in the moments where I would suddenly find myself alone, I would suddenly realize how unhappy I was deep down, and because things would catch up with me, and I would suddenly realize I'd be like, oh my God, like I really felt that my life as it was, where I was loved by my friends and family, had a real time limit on it. It was just as long as I could sustain this lie, basically, that that I was pretending to be straight. It was
Yeah.
until the point that I could no longer do that. And then at that point, I really felt that everyone was going to abandon me and that I would then have to, I don't even know, like move abroad or, it felt really hard for me to even fathom what that next part of my life would look like. Um, so, but actually, then I was lucky enough that because I studied Spanish and history at university, I got the opportunity to go and move abroad for a year. And so I lived in South America for a year. And that experience for me was really important because it allowed me to step outside of this bubble that I had grown up in. And I was suddenly like exposed to all sorts of different people, and I was quite quickly starting to realize that, oh my God, it's actually very normal to be gay. And even though there was still a lot of internalized homophobia that I was carrying with me, it was like the cogs were starting to turn slightly. And so that then when I came back to the UK, about a year and a half after I got back, I finally kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together in my head.
Mm.
But for a long time, I'd been repressing it very deeply and had not ever let it really, never really let myself actually accept that I was gay. Like as far as I was concerned, I was straight. I just like these thoughts that I was having, like I wouldn't let myself even go there.
Mm.
Um, but it was only when I came back from my year abroad after I finished my degree, when we all went into lockdown, that I was basically forced to slow down and actually think everything through. And it was at that point that I kind of came to terms with the fact that I was actually gay. And I then started coming out to my friends. And what I found, even though that was an incredibly scary process for me, I found that people were firstly very shocked, but then they were very supportive and loving. And so, kind of one by one, as I told each of my closest friends, I kind of grew the courage to tell more people. Then I
Mm.
told my family later that year, and the rest of I then put up an Instagram video about a couple of months later to make sure that everyone in my network knew, because I felt very strongly that I never wanted anyone to think that they couldn't come and speak to me about it. Um, and maybe, as I'm saying it now, it makes it almost sound like it was a very quick process. It was not at all. It was very hard, and there were a lot of difficult conversations that I had to have with people to help, but I think particularly like family members, to help them understand it. Not to say that they were ever like really rejecting of me, but I think actually I had to do a lot of work to kind of, with my family together, we had to work through this quite difficult thing to help them understand that it was normal, in the same way that I had come to understand that. Um, but ultimately, all of those fears that I'd had when I was younger, I think disappeared, because what I saw was that people were generally far more welcoming and kind than I had expected. And that so much of that kind of homophobia was like very internalized.
Mm.
And like that experience for me was then, hugely formative, that coming out experience. And I think I've continued to come out over the last 5 years, but what I feel that gave me was a deep sense of empathy. And because I felt like an outsider for so long, it really then felt so important to me that I always kind of sought to understand what other people were going through. And I think that's really come into like my filmmaking,
Yeah.
and to try and really understand people's characters, and like why, if someone's behaving a certain way, it's often because there's something going on beneath the surface. And so ultimately, yeah, that experience of coming out as gay, like, sure, it was freaking difficult and challenging, but actually I wouldn't change any of it, because I feel like made me the person that I am today.
That's just, I'm glad you said that because that's where my next kind of line was going, which is that the experience is the thing that has made you the amazing filmmaker. And obviously, I don't know how empathetic you were before you kind of were at peace with your identity and you kind of shared that with the world, but I can't imagine that it's made you less empathetic. And I think it's also it's. I just wanted to say because I told you this in the kind of the intro chat that we had a couple of weeks ago, but for the benefit of the listener and the viewer,
Hmm.
I don't I don't ask the guests about their experiences before we hit record. And the reason that I don't do that is because I want the reaction that I give to be a genuine one.
Mm.
And also, if I'm honest, it gives me slightly more license to ask questions in a bit more of a clumsy way because they're not pre-prepared.
Yeah, yeah.
So please redirect me
Be clumsy. Be
if I
clumsy.
if I'm going the wrong way on this stuff. But I guess it's one of the questions that you probably had a lot, which
Mm,
is when did you first realize that? Because I appreciate you said it took a while for you to accept that you were
mm.
gay, but when did you, with hindsight, first start to realize that you could be?
It's a really tough question, and I've always struggled to pinpoint it. Um, I think the reason I've struggled to pinpoint it is because when I was at school and when I was kind of when I was in my group at university as well, it felt I was constantly exposed to people around me talking negatively of the people that had come out as gay.
Yeah.
And so kind of every time that I heard someone be referred to as, with a homophobic slur, or if someone, yeah, any kind of negativity that was shown towards the people that had taken the courage to come out, towards their behavior, towards the way they acted, like every time that pushed me deeper into the closet. And
Mm.
it's funny because I think maybe I knew deep down, but because it was so internal, it's really hard to actually ever like pinpoint a moment where I knew for the first time. I knew like the moment that I knew that I was definitely gay and that I couldn't go back to being straight, and that I knew that it was going to have I felt at a point during the pandemic that if I didn't come out as straight, something really bad was going to happen because
Mm.
I wasn't going to be able to manage holding it anymore. Like I felt like I don't want to say I was suicidal because I never felt like I got to that point. All I knew was that I felt there was a turning point during the pandemic when I felt so strongly that I felt so like angry at the world, and I had this like aggression kind of pent up inside me. And I felt that I couldn't go on without telling someone, because it was the only way to like get rid of it. And I was like doing loads of exercise, I was journaling, I was doing meditation, I was doing all these things to like deal with it, but like nothing was actually getting rid of that like quite overwhelming feeling.
So all of those things that you've just mentioned, they're all individually, they're like really good uh, processing
Mm.
methods, but they're all still, even though you're writing stuff out, it's all still insular, right? And it's
Yeah,
still stuck in
exactly.
your head, isn't it? Did
Mm.
you ever speak to a professional at all to kind of help you understand what was going on?
No, I was terrified. I was
Wow.
absolutely terrified. I remember I was so strategic about who I chose to tell first, because I was so scared that like the word was going to spread about the fact that I was gay, that I told one friend who I knew wasn't in my like uni friends group and wasn't in my school friends group. And so I knew they were like a kind of an external figure that I could go to, where there was no risk of them like spreading the word. And I was just to kind of express how scared I was. I didn't want to tell her over the phone. I didn't want to text her. I said to her, I was like, we've got to go, and we've got to go for a walk on my local common in the local park. And I like was trying to like guide her into the middle of the park so that we were really far away from anyone else. And she was, because she didn't know, that I had something to say, and she just thought we were going on a walk. She was like quite understandably like, I think we should like go near the pub, like it's getting dark, like I think we should go around other people. But I was thinking, oh my God, I can't be within walking distance or earshot of anyone else in case, someone in the local area overhears, and then they start spreading it and they start spreading it. And obviously, like, no one cares. But like, it was so in my head. And I, got to the point where she was like, no, I think we should just stay here. And so I had to just say it there, right, in front of this pub where I was terrified someone was going to overhear. But that was kind of the level I was at. I was so afraid.
That is, I mean, the weight of that, and this is, I mean, that's a consistent strand of all kind of mental health challenges, isn't it? It means so much more to you
Hmm.
it means to most other people.
Yeah.
And it becomes, especially when you haven't had that chance to talk about it, and I completely understand why you didn't want to do that. And just even like the fact that you were having to think really specifically about who you would tell at the order that you tell them in. I mean, that's such a burden, such a burden for you to bear without having any kind of outlet to say whether it's a professional or not. And I can, I mean, you've already said it pretty clearly that once you started that process,
Hmm.
you
Oh, I couldn't get enough of it once I started it. Once I started, I was like, "This is amazing."
I'm going to tell
I
everyone.
was thinking, I was like, "Who am I going to tell next?"
That's incredible. And so that the pandemic
Mm.
experience then was it the kind of the intensity of the isolation that really all sort of brought it to a head for you then? Just like you were already kind of experiencing these intense feelings and you've got this weight, and then you're like, stay in that building. You're not allowed to go out and see people. It's that kind of intensity ramped up to a crescendo for you.
Yeah, I think for me, it was mainly the fact that I had been at university, and in March 2020, I came home to my parents' house, and I stayed there for about a year.
Mm.
Um, and it was kind of like I'd been very like caught up in this, student world, and I had had girlfriends, and I was just, I was a student. I was part of this community where everyone was going out all the time, and when you're not going out, you're in the library, and it's all very like fast paced, and there's not really time to actually like sit down and think about like you as a person, like who you
Yeah.
want to be. And I think suddenly during the pandemic, having that time, that as hard as the pandemic was, I know for so many people, I felt personally, I felt it actually helped me because it gave me the time to sit down. It forced me to actually to do some proper journaling, to actually sit with my thoughts and really think about like the person I wanted to be. And then I think also because I was with my family, it made me it kind of heightened that feeling of I think I was always most afraid of telling my family, because I was very aware of like the fact that I presumed that they really wanted grandkids, and I was worried about the fact I wasn't going to be able to have kids, and all these things that like now just don't matter to me as much because I know there's like solutions and there's so many things you can do. But at the time, I had such a strong idea in my head of like having to create this like traditional family that I was never going to be able to do, that I felt like I was never going to be able to do and have. And so I think because I was at home with my family, you're right, it probably was more, those feelings were more intense because it was like on a daily basis, I was there with my family, and like I was constantly feeling like, oh my God, I'm gonna at some point have to really let them down, and they're gonna hate me for it, and it's so awful, and I'm not gonna be able to be a part of this family in the same way that I have been for so long.
Wow. And again, you can share as much or as little of this as you want to. If I'm prying, I
Yeah,
apologize.
yeah.
But what was it like when you did tell your family, and how did the feeling in you change as you were doing that? Because I'm assuming here from what you've said, bit of a pressure valve, just go release, go. Oh, thank goodness, I've done that, and then you move on to the next stage because you said about having to spend a long time with them afterwards, telling them, helping them to understand that
Mm.
this is normal. This is
Yeah.
what it all means. What did it feel like doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it was not straightforward. And I want to kind of, before I go into this, I want to say that my family are now they could not be more supportive, and they are basically like LGBT activists, like more even more so than I am. They are like absolutely brilliant and so supportive. Um, but rolling back the clock to when I first told them, I think I would say they probably found it quite hard. I think they were all very shocked. I got them all in a room, and I think a lot of people that come out have different ways of doing it. Some people don't feel the need to come out because they feel like, understandably, that straight people don't have to come out, so why should a gay person have to do that?
Yeah.
And so some people, maybe just say, "Oh yeah, guys, by the way, I've got a boyfriend." But I felt that in order to get to a point where my family were like fully on board with it, I felt like they needed to understand how hard it had been and like how painful it was for me. Because I felt like without that understanding, maybe we wouldn't get to a point where they would be so kind of open to it. So I got them all in one room. I had told my sister before, so I sort of had an ally in a way, but I got my brother, my sister, my mum, my dad in a room together, and I had written this kind of this speech, and through basically streaming tears, I presented the speech to them, and they immediately they all looked like so shocked, but at the same time, we all had a hug, and it was quite sweet, but it was not like I told them, and then it was just like that. We then had a few nights of talking through like how it felt over the years, and kind of I was kind of I guess I was allowing them to ask questions, and I think the easy thing would have been, and I kind of had a couple of friends on standby for this, the easy thing would have been to like tell them and then just to go and stay with a friend, or
Mm.
to like run away from it. But I think what I've discovered was that we needed to be there as a family, as a unit, and for me to express to them that this was nothing. A, there's nothing wrong with me, but B, that there was nothing that is not their fault. It's not their fault that I felt this pain, and that I felt this sadness, and that this is something that it was a much wider societal issue, and to an extent it still is today. Not so much in the UK, but in many other countries it is still a huge issue. And like, it's not anyone individual's um fault, that they might have expressed homophobic language or behavior. It's always because as a society there hasn't been enough done for us all to understand that we need to be empathetic to one another, and that every single person is very different, whether that is sexuality or whatever else. So I think we, as a family, kind of went through a period of like understanding kind of what it meant to be gay, and like actually that sure it was my sexuality that they didn't know about before, that they now knew my sexuality was different to perhaps what they thought it was, but actually that deep down, like I was still the same person,
Yeah.
and I wasn't going to change. Like I wasn't going to drastically change my behavior just because I came out. And I think that was kind of that is quite a common fear, I think, of some parents, that sort of your son comes out and then they have this idea of the gay perception of someone that's super flamboyant, and that's absolutely fine. Anyone can be flamboyant if they would like to be, and I would really encourage people to feel like they can do that if that's important to them. But ultimately, like, firstly, that doesn't matter, but secondly, like, I think for me, I was quite sure by this point that like I knew that me as a person, I wasn't gonna like suddenly, I wasn't desperate to go and change drastically in my behavior, but I did feel that my sexuality, I had never been honest about my actual sexuality. That was quite a long-winded answer.
It's a great answer. It's a great answer. And I'm conscious I'm sort of jumping around a bit here, but if we kind of we fast forward to the the post coming out
Yeah.
period, so you've told your friends, you've told your family, you've processed it all together,
Hmm.
um, and life goes on. And now here you are 5 years later.
Hmm.
You said 5 years. Yeah, it was,
Yeah, yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah,
5 years.
5 years later, since you came out and since you went through that experience with your friends and family and telling them, how has your mental health been since?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question because I'd say like the period afterwards, I'd say it's pretty good. Like for a while it was pretty good because there is this kind of high almost. I felt there was this high like every time I told someone that actually because I was being my most vulnerable with them, suddenly like I found that all of my friendships and my relationships with my family like deepened significantly
Yeah.
because they all suddenly felt more open talking to me about their own insecurities. And, it was amazing to see the way that a lot of my friends who I had thought would be more like maybe not as open to it, like ultimately like would come to me and start talking about their sexuality. And like, now I would say that all of my friends are really open to exploring their sexuality. And I think that's been so special. But, sexuality aside, it just made all of my relationships and my friendships so much deeper.
Mm,
So yeah, I'd say the initial period, like my mental health improved. I think that probably also was because the world was still like moving quite slowly,
yeah.
like with the pandemic, and so like it really that really gave me the space to have all those conversations. I'd say that if I came out now, it would be much harder to actually like have the time to like go and spend 3 hours walking with someone round a park and then the next day going and chatting to someone else. Like there was a beauty at that in that moment in that era that like I could call someone up and we would have a 2 hour call, whereas now I think the rhythm of life for everyone has sped back up.
Yeah.
um and so I'd say yeah, my mental health has, I think as with anyone, it's been kind of ups and down. I'd say that like coming out is never just you come out and that's done. It's like there are times when I feel like I need to remind myself that I'm gay and that I need to like keep putting myself in those spaces because, I think there are at moments I felt like, oh, I'm still, I'm gay, but I'm still living in this very straight world and
Mm,
not really like actually being gay. Like I'm not actually like hanging out with that many other gay people, or I'm not going out to gay places. And so I think over the last kind of few years, I've been really trying to like push myself more into those spaces to make sure that I am not slipping back into that kind of mold of just being a straight person, because I think that's when I found my mental health to be at its lowest. Um, I'd say that I still find like if I do find myself in a setting where it is quite traditional in the sense that there's lots of like straight couples, there's lots of like sort of models of the classic traditional family like mother, father and children. I still find that challenging because I kind of it takes me back to that place that I was in before I came
mm,
out, and it makes me question whether I can be gay, or and like whether I am normal. And it makes me it kind of puts those ideas back in my head about like that I'm an outsider. So I think that is why I feel that I need to keep speaking about being gay, about like actually having conversations with people about it, and going to, leaning into friendships with other gay people, and going to, listening to a gay podcast, going to a gay running club, like doing that kind of stuff for me is helpful because it continues to reassure me that being gay is normal, and that, I'm not the outcast, because I think that's what my head would tell me otherwise.
Mm.
I think maybe there is also something to be said for like there is a long because you're analyzing everything so carefully for so long when you're in the closet, like you're analyzing like your behavior, you're analyzing your dress sense, you're trying so hard to like keep this image of yourself as a straight person so that no one like discovers you, that I think for me, I wonder whether maybe long term it's left me with quite a lot of like a naturally kind of overthinking mind, because I think I've for so long been hyper analyzing everything. And that I think, at times is a blessing. I'd say in with my film stuff, like it can be really helpful to make sure that everything is like thought through, and film is a lot about like perception and image. So like it has been helpful in some respects, but at times it's a pain in the ass, to be honest.
Having made contact hours and having had that experience yourself,
Yeah.
does that make you more uh, inclined towards having conversations with a professional, with a therapist, to kind of help you to process? Because I completely understand. I mean, like logically, everything that you've just said about what's happened since you came
Mm,
out, I get it completely. It makes total sense.
mm.
But have you ever spoken to somebody since to help you to unpack that?
I mean, it's funny because I think that I have some amazing friends, and including friends that like work in, a friend that runs a gay podcast, and I've never had professional therapy about my sexuality because I've felt like I've been so supported
Mm,
in the relationships that I have with my friends, and like I have, relationships where I'm able to go to them if I'm feeling a certain way. And they're, I would hope they feel that they can also come to me. And so I think for that reason, I haven't actually ever had professional help with it. But yeah, I would say that definitely what Contact Hours has done for me is it's shown me that there is that support available for when you are feeling at your lowest ebb. And I think, now if I think back to kind of where I was in 2020, if I had known about, the Hope line from Papyrus, or some of the other, Shout, the text service, if I had known about these helplines that are there to literally to help people when they are feeling at their lowest,
mm,
I think I would have definitely considered calling one of them as a kind of first point of call, because it is that brilliant confidential person that I was trying to find.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think, I hope that young people who are on their own journey of like discovering their sexuality or just their identity, and, whether they are having dark feelings or not, I really hope that the work that we're doing right now with Contact Hours is helping more young people to know that that support is there, and
Mm.
that it's non-judgmental, it's confidential, and it will help them.
I pick up on something that you said about. I think the phrase was, I've not had therapy about my sexuality."
Yeah.
My question was coming from a slightly different place.
Okay.
Obviously, your sexuality is you,
Yeah, yeah.
and the two are intrinsically linked.
Yeah.
But I would ask the same question of somebody who, let's say, they had experienced a tragic event, or they'd had a traumatic event that came out of nowhere. So, a car crash or something like that. Just because the mind is an arse
Hmm.
and it tricks you into thinking that you've got it all sorted, and then it kicks you.
Oh, I don't think I've got it all sorted. Don't worry.
Well, no, I'm not saying that either. But I wasn't saying, I wasn't suggesting that you need to go to therapy to talk about your sexuality. I'm thinking more in terms of um, the the benefit that you can gain in terms of how you process
Hmm.
thoughts that are going through your head, so that you can deal with it in a way that helps you to be as at ease and as contented as you can possibly be. Because it is, it's really interesting hearing you talk about the fact that you you are making a conscious effort to go and do more things with members of the gay community. You've realised that you haven't been doing that as much since you came out.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, I mean, that's fascinating to me, because do you feel do you feel like an obligation to do that? Is like,
No, no, I don't feel an obligation to do that at all. And I have a very big mix of, like, I do not have loads of gay friends. I've got some gay friends, but like I have such a mixed bag of straight friends, gay friends.
yeah,
And I don't feel an obligation to do that, but I think, for example, there's a brilliant gay podcast that I listen to that I used to be an assistant on, called All Out, which I would recommend for anyone who is gay or just wants to understand more about the gay experience.
yeah,
And the reason I got involved with that podcast was because I joined a gay filmmakers community, and then through that group chat, I heard about this podcast. They were looking for an assistant at the time, and I was needing some like part-time work alongside while I was developing contact hours. And so I went and I was this assistant. And what it meant for me was that I was then listening while we were doing these podcast recordings. They would have these guests, mostly, I think they were all older than I was by at least a few years, and all sorts of gay people from different walks of life, in a variety of careers. Sky Sports presenter, CEO of, big corporate finance group, actors, whatever, all sorts of different people talking about their experience of being gay. And for me, by being there and listening to all those conversations, it helped me to process my own
mm,
experiences, kind
yeah,
of like, what we're doing here today. It's like, by listening to that podcast, it's been hugely helpful for me listening to people that are further along on their coming out journeys, and helping me to like understand that these things that I'd felt were normal, and that
yeah,
that coming out is a continual journey, and that every single coming out journey is different. Every gay person is different. No gay person, looks the same or behaves the same way. And so I think, for me, the value in leaning into, the gay community in that respect, and being on this podcast and listening to this podcast, was it was helping me to understand myself in a deeper way.
yeah, yeah. Fascinating. It's genuinely fascinating. Um, we've we've covered an awful lot of ground. I'm very aware of that. But on that journey that you've been on, have
Mm.
there been any real sort of light bulb moments for you along the way? So the where as the that experience that you've been through, and I include coming out and that kind of process of creating contact hours as well, because both are obviously so uh, influential on your well-being, and your learning and your self-awareness as well. But have there been any kind of moments where you thought, oh, I need to start doing this more because that's helpful for me, or I need to stop doing this because I could see that that's problematic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't know whether there's specific moments, but I think there are moments when I felt like I've been at a really low point,
Mm.
and I can think of a holiday I was on that was really hard, and I think I found it challenging because I was with lots of extended family, and there were quite a lot of kind of couples, and I was still feeling a bit like it was again bringing back those kind of feelings of feeling like an outsider and feeling like I just wasn't like worthy.
Mm.
I didn't have this relationship that all of them had. And I think I really struggled on that holiday and I felt really depressed. And I think that at the time, all I needed to do was just say something. I know, and it's so hard to do that when you're feeling really shit.
Yeah.
Because, I was on holiday, everyone was like, you're napping by the pool anyway. So actually, it's quite difficult to see when someone is in that depressive state because
Everyone's in a sort of a go slow already.
everyone's in a go so way already. So, me taking myself off for a nap in the afternoon was not because I was on holiday. It's because I was depressed and I didn't want to be present and I couldn't bring myself to be present because I didn't feel like I deserved a place there and I felt very like invisible almost. But like when that I felt that similar feeling happen more recently, I said to myself, I have to speak. I have to speak to my parents. I have to say something because if I had just said something during that experience, we could have, even though I felt like I was going to ruin the holiday by like being open about how I was feeling, if I had just said something, it would have made my whole holiday so much better
Yeah.
because we then could have had that conversation, we could have talked through it, it would have helped me to understand it. And so I think what happened in that original holiday was that I came home, did some journaling, spoke to my friends about it, and it took quite a long time to figure out like what it was that was making me feel really depressed. And then again, it, brought me back to this. I realized that it was probably because I wasn't being vocal enough about my sexuality. I wasn't kind of like wasn't reminding myself of who I was, and I wasn't kind of almost putting that into the conversation. I was like falling back into the trap of like trying to emulate other people.
Yeah, like masking it.
Yeah, I was masking it. And so I think that recently when I felt those feelings come up again, I've like just tried to tackle it much more quickly. And it is really, really hard. But like going and speaking to my parents and telling them how I'm feeling or like speaking to, friends much more quickly because then it just deals with it more quickly and it also helps them to understand that like even though coming out is it seems like it's quite a like finite thing. It's like you decide to come out of the closet, you're out, that's good, that's great, that's it. Actually, it is an ongoing process and it is still really hard. And so I think having now had those conversations with my family more recently, it's like they now understand that it is still a challenge. Um, and I think that's probably true of anyone that's going through something, is that like I think that maybe there is something that a lot of people feel that it's all right to kind of to bring up something once and then work through it as a unit with your friends or with your family. But then, if it comes back up, if it crops back up further down the line, I think sometimes we can feel that we don't want to burden them with it again
Yeah.
because like that for as far as they're concerned, like it's dealt with, it's over. But like I think it's really important that well, I found it really important that I felt like I needed to bring it up for my own well-being.
Mm. And bringing it up before it becomes a big issue,
Yeah.
and then I guess ultimately, kind of as you become more and more comfortable, it's the little micro behaviors. That's, I don't need to say little micro. It's the micro
Yeah.
behaviors that kind of weave it into your your kind of everyday existence and your interactions that mean that you don't have to say anything because
Hmm.
you're already at one, you're kind of already at peace with it, and you've already started to embrace it and show it and not hide it at all. Sorry, that's a really clumsy way of.
No, I understand what you're saying. I think it's more, it's like that people can have a closer eye on how you're feeling before before it becomes an issue. It's like you're all kind of aware of one another and what might be a trigger for
Yeah,
you.
and for you as well, because you've got that self-awareness, so you can spot it sooner. You mentioned earlier, and this is something I've lost count of how many times I've said this over the course of recording this, but it's I've had enough kind of experience in therapy that I can understand what sort of things might trigger me and influence my mental health, my mood.
Mm,
But I sometimes it still takes me quite a while to realize that that's what's happened.
yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah,
And you're in the same way that you said you talked about coming out is not it's not a I've done that, move on. It's an ongoing journey.
yeah.
Mental health is the same. You isn't it? It's not linear.
No,
You are always once you are aware of the things that cause you a problem, so the kind of the trigger situations, you can get better at managing how you respond to those triggers. And over time, you gradually make the problem smaller because it becomes more normal.
yeah, and you know that you've got through it before, so that gives you the confidence that you know you can get through it again.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Wow, this has been a brilliant conversation. We're at question 5 already, Harry.
Okay.
I feel like I could ask you a slightly awkward questions for hours and hours, but I'll. Question number 5 is somebody is hearing this
Yeah.
or watching this conversation, and they're going through something similar. They're earlier on in their journey than you are today.
Mm.
What, in your experience, is the most important thing that that person can do?
I mean, I think the most important thing they can do is just speak to somebody, just one person, whoever it is, whether it's a friend, a family member, someone at the end of a helpline, just speak to one person because I think that feeling of getting something off your chest is just so important for your own well-being.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I would say that would be it. I also kind of just had a thought. I was thinking that, the reason it's so important with just taking it back to sexuality more specifically,
yeah,
the reason I think it's so important that people come out is because when you're in the closet and not comfortable with your sexuality or who you are as a person, it has an impact on all of the people around you. Like, I know that I was not a good person at times to my family and to my friends when I was in that really dark place because I was so like afraid and terrified and so ashamed of who I was. And I think what I've now realized, having done a lot of reflection, is that like the longer someone is in the closet, the more it affects the people around them. It affects their relationships. It affects their relationships because you're essentially, if you're lying about being in a straight relationship, you're lying to your partner, and that is then meaning that they're in a, they're feeling that they're getting love, but it's not actually real, stopping them from being happy. You're not being necessarily like particularly friendly, you might be more aggressive. And
yeah,
so I think it's really important that as a society, we encourage people to come out and that people feel that they can do that because otherwise that feeling of pent up anger at yourself and the world around you, like it could have really negative impacts. And I think that's why it's so important that people are encouraged to be open about who they are.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And that is a fantastic insight to leave this conversation on, Harry. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. Thank you for being so open, so erudite as well. Like,
Thank you.
I feel sometimes I bumble my way through these conversations, and you are an incredibly sharp, smart,
Oh,
empathetic, lovely man.
oh, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
I mean it. I mean it from my heart. To have a sense of what you shared today, to have a sense of what you've been through, and knowing that many others will have experienced that, or are experiencing that, or will experience that in the future. The fact that you've been able to share that today so generously and so clearly is huge, and I'm really grateful that you've done that for us today. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And it's been a pleasure to come on the podcast, and thank you for creating this space for this discussion.
You're very welcome, mate. You're very welcome. And if I can work out another format of this that I can get you and Rufus on to talk
Oh
more
yeah,
about ours in the future, we will 100% do that as well, because that's
brilliant.
really, really important. Um, so all that remains for me to say now is
Mhm.
thank you to everybody for joining us for this conversation, for listening, for watching along. If you found this conversation helpful, please share it with other people, bang it out on the socials, send it directly to somebody that you think needs to hear this, because it's only by getting this in front of more people that it can do the job that it's intended for, which is to help destigmatize men's mental health one chat at a time. If you are listening to this on the podcast platforms, what would be incredibly kind of you and much appreciated is if you could review the show, because reviews apparently really help to catapult this into more people's feeds. Um, Obviously, give it 5 stars. Don't even think about doing
Obviously.
5 stars. But it doesn't matter what you say, although lovely things would be nice. But it's just that star rating that really helps to get this in front of more people. So on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, etc., if you could review it, that would be much appreciated. It's been lovely to meet you, Harry. Really appreciated your time today. We will be back again soon with another episode of Good Enough Chats.